Welcome back, everyone. Before the pandemic hit, a lot of attention, as we all know, was paid to the opioid crisis. It was in the news every single day. The numbers were stunning. It was an emergency. And during the pandemic, by the way, we might have been talking about that a lot and COVID-19 a lot, but guess what? During the pandemic, the opioid crisis actually became more serious. Think about it. People were locked up at home. They were more lonely and whatnot. And now that we're coming out of the pandemic and whatever, there's been a real move to say, hey, wait a minute, let's get back on this topic. It didn't go away. It affects a major portion of our population. People are dying from it. Families are getting ruined from it. Well, Assemblywoman Carrie Woerner, 113th District, and I've talked a lot about this over the years. And just recently, she was prime mover in making certain that just what I said gets back on the front pages. So welcome, Carrie. Very nice to have you back again.
Thank you, Jesse. It's great to be here.
I'm going to save this to the end, but it looks like our state is opening up again, and I want to know what you think about that. But Carrie, before that, just last week, I understand, I think it's called the Opioid Settlement Fund, was approved by the legislators, and is going before the governor to be signed. So I want to talk about this. Give us just a little bit of background on this first.
So much of the background is what you were talking about to begin with, which is over the course of the last 10, 15 years, manufacturers, distributors of modern opioid prescription drugs have oversold these drugs and have convinced prescribers that they would be not addictive, and in fact they were addictive. And so we have a crisis that has hit every neighborhood in this state of people who have developed an addiction to heroin because they were prescribed opioids. And the Attorney General, Tish James, has filed a lawsuit, as have many counties across the state, has filed a lawsuit to hold the manufacturers, distributors of these drugs accountable for the harm that they have caused in our communities. And those lawsuits are ongoing. We anticipate that they will be settled and that there will be a substantial settlement that comes with that settlement of those lawsuits, not dissimilar to the tobacco settlement that was in the 90s, I think the 90s. Anyway, so what we are hoping to accomplish with this legislation is to ensure that the funds that are collected through this settlement, that are, frankly and horribly earned with the lives that have been destroyed through these drugs, that those monies are put to the purpose of preventing addiction, treating addiction, and supporting people in recovery from addiction. And that is the purpose, that's the public purpose of these dollars, and we want to make sure that happens. So the opioid settlement legislation establishes a dedicated fund that ensures that these dollars will supplement the normal funding that the state provides to substance abuse programs. So it's going to supplement it, not supplant it, that it will be used for a described or a defined set of purposes that's pretty broad, but very much directed at prevention, harm reduction, and support in recovery, and that and that there is some accountability, so that we are going to track what is how those dollars are, how many dollars come in, how they're used, and how effective those programs are that receive the dollars, so that we have some transparency and accountability around this process.
Yeah, I've got it. In researching this a bit, and thanks to your office, they gave me some very good talking points here too, Carrie, by the way, as always. I was always interested, as I know many of our viewers would be, on what you would consider the eligible expenses for something like this, and also where this money goes in the coffers to make certain that the money that is dedicated to this cause goes to this cause. But in terms of eligible expenses, so you get a sense of this, disorder prevention, treatment, recovery, harm reduction, housing, community-based programs, vocational and educational training. And when you think about it, when you either know someone or have someone that is close to you that is going through opioid addiction recovery, you understand that all of these things touch these people in very, very significant ways. I've heard the term lockbox, Carrie, and I know that that's got something to do with what you and I were just saying, that the money that is intended to go to these eligible expenses goes there. Is that how this lockbox works?
Exactly. I mean, the notion of a lockbox is that you can only open the box to take money out for a specific purpose. That the monies that are in the settlement fund are in a lockbox that can only be used for these purposes. So they cannot be taken away and moved to the general fund for other purposes. And I think that discipline associated with a dedicated fund is really critical here. That these services, frankly, we have underfunded for years. That in the prioritization of human service funding, we just have not provided adequate funding for addiction-related services, mental health-related services, because a lot of the individuals who struggle with the disease of addiction have multiple diagnoses, both addiction as well as mental health. So providing adequate funding to deal with these problems, to give communities the money that they need to develop tools to deal with the problems, as well as to do the prevention and education up front, all of the harm reduction and then support in recovery is really critical, because it is community-based that works, and we've seen that. And certainly in Warren, Washington, and Saratoga County, where we have a very dedicated and committed group of people in the prevention and recovery space, we have seen how important those community-based programs are. So these dollars will be dedicated to making sure that communities have the monies that they need to deliver services that are tailored to the population of people who most need them in our communities.
Yeah, I've got it. And just for our viewers, another way to say this, of course, is that you hear the term general fund a lot. The legislation is built in a way that says this is not going to go into a general fund, where it could be siphoned off for any number of different reasons, right? That this lockbox concept means that it will be used specifically for the intended use.
That is correct.
Now, I would imagine that advisory board would be set up to sort of monitor everything that you're talking about. Is that true? And if so, how's it going to operate?
Yeah, so the legislation does include the creation of an advisory board whose function is to look at the science, the evidence-based, to develop evidence-based recommendations for how the money should be used. So to add to or subtract from the list of acceptable uses of the money, to recommend specific funding items, and then the legislature will take their recommendations and appropriate money through the budgeting process using funds that are in the lockbox.
Good. Now, that advisory board, I think that you had told me, will actually have to generate a report.
Yes, correct. Every November they'll have to generate a report with their recommendations, as well as a report with the dashboard information. So how has the money been used? How effective has it been at reducing the impact in our communities of the disease of addiction? And all of that will be available publicly at the end of each year.
You always hear the term transparency in government, and I think that pertains to a lot of projects. Could be infrastructure, could be any number of different things. Something seems so important that transparency and the things that you're talking about apply when it comes to this crisis.
Absolutely. I mean, like you, I would say that one of the things that I feel very strongly about is that we should have greater transparency and accountability in how dollars are spent, and that we should any program that is funded should have a set of metrics associated with it to determine whether or not it is an effective use of dollars. And, when I say that, not to be punitive, but to just say that something might sound good on paper, but when you go to implementing it, you may find out that the experience of it isn't as effective as you thought it would be. And that's fine. That's part of the process of learning. But you don't actually learn unless you acknowledge that this program isn't as effective as it could be or should be. And so we're either going to be able to fix that, or instead of spending money to fund this program again, let's fund something else instead that might be more effective. So you have to have that sort of model of continuous improvement. And part of that is being willing to establish a set of metrics to evaluate the effectiveness of any particular funded program, and then look at whether it is effective. And if it is, great, fund it again. If it's not effective, either fix it or fund something different. And I think that this is part of my background is from the private sector, is this notion of continuous improvement, of always looking at how are we doing and what can we be doing better. And we don't do that enough. And as I authored this legislation, it was really important to me to put that element in, because I think that's really critical. We should do it all the time, but here we're going to have a significant amount of money dedicated to eradicating a problem, and we need to know that money is actually working. So it's a really important piece of it, and thank you so much for highlighting this.
Oh, and thank you so much for explaining it. I'm so grateful, and I know so many of us are so grateful that you and your peers, got behind this legislation and pushed it and didn't take no. You took no for encouragement, if you know what I mean. You weren't going to let this thing go. I know you weren't.
I was not.
And I mean, all indications are, keep your fingers crossed, that the governor's going to sign this. I assume that'll be in the next couple of weeks or so, right? And then off we go. Hey, in closing, state's opening up, and outside of running into you at that beautiful antique store in Greenwich, what are you going to do this summer that
well,
you
let's see.
haven't been able to do?
I'm going to go to fairs and festivals and parades, and I'm going to go to the races. And I am so looking forward to being out in the community. I have already accepted invitations to the town of Moreau block party, and to an event at the racetrack, and all kinds of things that we missed a year of being able to do. And I'm excited to be out in the community and joining with people as we once again go back to having a normal summer. And it's finally, hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Yes, right. I'll second that. And I look forward to running into you at most of those things that you just described, by the way. All right. Stay safe, Carrie. And it was great to talk to you. And thank you again so much for the work that you've done on this. Okay.
It is an honor and a privilege to do it.
Okay. I'll talk to you.
Talk to you later.